What is happening, everybody? I'm Larry Roberts.
And I'm Sarah Losi, and this is Branded, your comprehensive guide to creative branding.
And on this episode of the podcast, we are going to go deep. We've got a guest with us today that really specializes in, well, that's kind of redundancy there, but he specializes in deep specialization. Yes. So is there another word for specialize that I should have used there? I don't know. But anyways, Quinn is joining us today. We're going to talk about deep specialization and how you can set yourself apart from some of your competition by really focusing on what you're doing. And then we may steer the conversation to, we might get a little salesy somewhere in the conversation as well. And I'm pretty excited about that concept. So Corey, thank you so much for joining us.
Larry, Sarah, I am excited to be here.
I can tell.
We're excited to have you here.
I've had my coffee already, as you can tell.
Oh, I haven't. This might be a problem.
I'll lift the energy in the room here.
I'm right there with you, Corey. I'm on monster number 2. Okay. So we're in good
goodness.
shape.
All right. Y'all cover this. I'm going to go nap in the back.
Yeah, we got
This is so fine.
So Corey, tell us, man, talk to us about deep specialization. I mean, when we found each other on Podmatch, which once again, Sarah and I are the Alex Sanfilippo fan club. We love Podmatch. We love Alex and what he's built there.
Yeah.
So we found you there and felt it was a good match for the show. And I really was intrigued by deep specialization. Help me understand the concept.
Sure. Well, the idea of niching down or specializing isn't new in the world of business. It's fairly common. A lot of people talk about it. However, what I've noticed over the years and in my experience in working with agencies and my clients is that a lot of people focus on identifying a specialization based on the things like, how big is the market? How much money could I potentially make? Like, what's the revenue opportunity? Which is great, and it should be a part of the equation. But the thing that they miss is a critical one, which is they lack an understanding of, do I actually care about these people? Do I care about an audience or a niche, right? Most people just look at a spreadsheet and they say, well, yeah, dentists. There's a lot of dentists out there. Let's target them. But they forget the fact that in order to be successful today, you have to actually have empathy for this audience. You have to actually care about them. In the long run, that is what equals success.
Yeah, I love that take because there's so many opportunities that are out there that I've looked at and I've thought, yeah, but can I do that for 3, 5, 7, 10 years? You know, there's podcasts that I've started that have gone 2, 3 episodes. And I'm like, I can't even envision talking about this anymore. This is not going to work for me, but it's such an opportunity to build a big show in this particular niche. So it's very easy to fall in that trap.
No, I feel like even just like in the 2 years I've been in business, I've changed my specialization so many times because I get tired of it. And I just kind of flip flop whenever I find something new that I'm interested in. So definitely I need to find that thing. Help me find the thing.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is that the empathy and the care goes both ways. You actually have to care about the audience, but then at the same time, it has to drive you as a founder, right? Not only do you, let's call it dentists. I'm not sure if you guys are targeting dentists. I doubt it, but let's just say, for example,
if a dentist wants a podcast, come on over.
Okay. Hey, they probably should have a podcast.
They definitely should.
So right. So as relates to dentistry, you want to care about that audience because in today's world, in fact, I'll give you a quick example of what I want to illustrate here. Well, so part of the work I do is I work with agencies and I help them to specialize in with deep specialization. And part of the work I do is I interview their clients. So I was on a call with a med spa business owner, this wonderful little med spa, family owned. It's up in Oregon, outside of Portland. And this wonderful business owner, she's in like her mid 40s, and she's running her med spa. Her daughter works for them. And what she shared with me is that 5 times a day, she'll get phone calls from agencies who want to sell her their agency services. Another 3 times a day, she'll get text messages from other agencies trying to get her attention. And then she'll get about 15 emails. And this happens on a daily basis. So this idea of specialization, again, is not new. And a lot of companies are testing the waters, right? The challenge that she has is that all of these messages are complete waste of time and complete noise in her world, right? And so the way to break through is not to just focus on, the offer that you could sell them or how much money you can make out of this med spa as an agency founder. It's more about connecting with who they are as a business owner, and more importantly, the industry itself. When you are able to communicate that you have some level of intimacy and care and understanding of the med spa industry, all of a sudden the way you communicate is different than all of that noise. And that's what's required today to break through.
When you say specialize and like a niche and everything, do you specifically mean a niche on who your audience is, or do you also mean deep specialization on a very specific offering versus being a more generalist?
Great question. Yeah. So generally speaking, there's two ways to specialize. Number one, you can specialize in what you do. For instance, SEO or podcast production and promotion, or whatever that flavor is for you. The other way to specialize is in who you serve. Okay. So for instance, you could serve dentists with, let's say, marketing. And so if you think about it as, remember like an Etch-a-Sketch? You guys remember what an Etch-a-Sketch is?
Of course.
You have this little childhood toy where you can kind of use these knobs to kind of move these things around. So if you imagine on a vertical axis, you have who you serve, and then what you serve is on the horizontal axis, for example. The further up you go is the more specialized you are in who you serve. And the further to the right you go is the more specialized in what you do. Well, from a positioning perspective, you could be extremely well specialized in what you do and who you serve. I do TikTok videos for dentists, or in your case, podcast videos for dentists. So it is a sort of a spectrum that you could focus on a lot of people and do a lot of things for them, or you could do one thing for a very specific audience. The work that I do specifically, Sarah, to answer your question, is about who you serve specifically. So the work that I help people to do is to find a specific audience, an industry, a niche, a vertical, and I help them to become a specialist in serving that audience, which I believe is a better strategy in the long term than specializing in what you do.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. We're talking about an audience, not necessarily a product or a specialization in a particular field.
Yes,
how do we
correct.
begin to conceptualize specializing a particular audience?
Sure. So most agency founders, and I speak again to agency founders, so that's typically the examples I give,
Sure.
which, and it's true for any business owner, is that they don't want to limit the amount of opportunity that's available to them in the marketplace. They wouldn't want to just say, oh, we're only going to work with dentists, or we're only going to work with HVAC companies, or whatever that example is for you.
Sure.
But the reality is that any agency founder or a business founder can actually build a very healthy, profitable business by serving a single market. For instance, in the United States, there are about 35,000 plumbing businesses. Okay. If you were able to get 3% of that market as an agency, if you're able to just get 3% of the total plumbers in the US, you could have a 7, even an 8-figure agency that has great profit margins.
Sure.
You see, the benefit of serving a single market is that you can streamline your operations. You take a lot of the variability out of serving this market because you're doing the same things over and over. And you also become much more intimately, you understand your target audience at a much deeper level. Right. And so all of those factors build into a very sort of healthy, fun to run, profitable business for an agency owner.
Yeah, I love that, because just the other night, when was it? Not last night, but night before last, I was at a networking event, and I met someone, and we were chatting for, I don't know, about an hour. And he goes, so what's your ideal client? And I sat there for a second. You'd think I'd have an answer for this, right? But I went through this exact same motions. I said, well, really anybody that has the desire to grow their audience, to grow their influence, to be a thought leader in their niche, to leverage a podcast as part of their marketing campaign.
Right.
And it just still, I felt so vague inside.
Sure.
I felt like that was not a clear, concise answer, because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to start a podcast for a dentist, a plumber, an AI specialist. I don't care who it is. If they want to start a podcast, I want to work with them. But
my target audience is someone ready to give me money.
So I would, just to build on that, Larry, I think it's not a black and white world, but if you look at an agency or a business that specializes in a specific service, let's say a platform, which is different than I think for the case for you guys. But let's just talk about, you guys remember this platform called Vine?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I miss Vine.
Yeah, I miss Vine too.
I was too old for it. I never got into it. I know it, but I was never.
Yeah. So
Vine walked so TikTok could run.
Yeah, there you go. So for listeners and viewers, Vine is the old version of TikTok, and the challenge is that if you specialize your agency on we're the Vine agency. Well, what happens when Vine goes away, which actually happened, right? It disappeared, right? Twitter shut it down or whatever, and so all of a sudden you have built your entire positioning on a singular platform. This is true for businesses that position themselves on, like, we're a HubSpot agency, or we are, a Salesforce.com implementation company. Well, what if Salesforce changes their business model? All the revenue that you've generated, all the employees you've hired, there's a lot more inherent risk because you're dependent on that platform. Versus the needs of a dentist, they're always going to have needs for growth. They're not going to understand how to grow their dental practice. They're dentists. And so they need an external expert, a specialist who understands their world and can apply the best tools available in the marketplace to their specific situation. That's much more durable in my mind.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We've talked about this a couple of times with people kind of just losing their platform. There's a woman in the podcasting industry that she built her entire community, her whole client list, everything on an email platform. And the email platform didn't like what she was posting and sending out, so they shut it down. And she lost like hundreds of thousands of contacts. She lost her courses. She lost all of her content overnight with no reason and no way to get it back because she specialized in a system that was not hers.
Well, I'll tie it back to the work you guys do. I think, businesses that maybe come up on like Instagram or LinkedIn or these other channels, those businesses don't own those channels' algorithms. They don't own the media that LinkedIn decides to promote or not, right? But when you build your own branded podcast, you own that media. That is your media, and you can promote it across all these channels, but it's an asset that you control and you own, which is why I'm a huge fan of the work you guys do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. One of the other things that comes into play, though, and a lot of times when you are specialized in a particular niche or a particular area, is and in my case especially, I'm the red hat guy, and when I'm out networking and I land a client, guess who they want to work with?
The red hat guy.
They want to work with the red hat guy, but the red hat guy can't be everywhere and to everything to everyone. So as someone that does specialize in a particular arena, not saying that's me, but hypothetically speaking, if you're the founder of that agency, there's times where it can be overwhelming to be the point person for the sales, for the implementation, for all aspects of the business. How can we work around that as well?
Sure. So I have a great story about that. So I come from 17 years in the agency space. The first couple of years I worked in the agency space, it was the agency I worked for was launched by the ex-CEO of MySpace. It's another old-timey platform. So MySpace.
Tom?
What's that? No,
Tom?
not Tom. No, this is Mike Jones. Yeah. You remember. And so MySpace is like Facebook. You make money from advertisers. Well, he left MySpace and he started an agency. Guess who he knew a lot of? Advertisers, right? Because he had worked at MySpace. That's just how that business worked. And so he built a beautiful, successful agency based on his network, right? So I believe at that point that's how you build a successful business is you have a charismatic founder that has a huge network of buyers and you just leverage that. And the challenge is kind of similar to the red hat example is that it is that founder is dependent on driving the revenue and driving the engine. Well, I learned that wasn't always the way that businesses grew, and it wasn't necessarily the best way. The next role I took was as a chief marketing officer at a digital marketing agency called Scorpion. And this business was different because they had this 6-person sales floor. They had a bunch of inbound calls, a bunch of attorneys. They were focused on attorneys. And the salespeople would answer these inbound calls and often do a one-call close, But part of the conversation, the sales conversation, didn't include anything about the founder of the agency. The attorneys who were calling into Scorpion didn't care about who the founder was. It wasn't a part of their buying process. What they cared about was working with an expert who understood how to help that law firm, that attorney, to grow their business, their firm. So the idea of having a founder as the central part of a business, I think is a really great way to start a business, but it becomes at a certain point a bottleneck, right? And it prevents you from being able to scale, because all of a sudden, all the sales have to come through you. All of the client support has to come through you, and so on and so forth. So one of the ways to escape founder-led sales, which is one of the things I talk about, is by specializing in a vertical market. Because you could build a brand around, you are the go-to expert. Your firm is a go-to expert at solving this specific problem for this specific audience. And when you're able to do that successfully, you're no longer dependent on that founder.
So, and it seems like this all ties together. So if we have the deep, if we have the deep specialization at the top here for a particular audience in a particular industry, right? And you have a particular founder, how do you cross that threshold though? And I ask this because, you know, a large percentage of our listeners are entrepreneurs that are growing their businesses, and they can easily find themselves in this specific position. I mean, most of the people that we know in this industry, they are their own personal brands. And a lot of the episodes that we have on the Branded Podcast are all about building personal brands. So help me understand that transition a little bit more, how you go from being that personal brand to an agency type brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So, or a founder independent brand. Okay. I'll call it that.
Sure.
So there's three things. I'll say there are three things that typically hold a founder sort of captive in the sales role specifically. One is that they lack a focus on a specific vertical market. When you are a generalist and you're serving businesses of all shapes and sizes, what tends to happen is that you have to have much more of a bespoke sales process. If you're talking to manufacturers on one sales call, and then a dentist on the next sales call, and then a retail store down in Ventura Boulevard, as an example, on the next sales call, there is too much of a variety in the sales process. There's too many nuances, right?
Sure.
And so you struggle being able to bring in a salesperson from the street and be able to say, I want you to be able to sell our product or our service to all of these variety of businesses. It's much more difficult to be successful because there's no system behind that, right? There's too much variety. So the lack of having a focus on a specific vertical market, which by the way, allows for a lot more repeatability in the sales process.
Sure.
That's number one, lack of focus. Number two is having watery positioning. What I mean by that is that most of your buyers and all of our buyers are not technical buyers. For example, in your world, I imagine the people who you're selling to don't understand how to produce necessarily a podcast and haven't done that successfully. They're
Correct.
coming to you as the expert. The challenge is that when a business has watery positioning, it means that your buyer can't meaningfully differentiate you from the 15 other options that they have available to them.
Sure.
Right. And so as a result of that, you end up competing on price and losing deals to lesser firms. Right. So you have that watery positioning requires the personality of the founder to step back in to be able to say, but it's me, I'm the red hat guy. You know me, you trust me. Right. So the founder gets pulled right back in. Okay.
Yeah.
That's number two. And then number three is when the founder steps away from the sales motion, maybe they have a sales resource or whatnot, an SDR. There's no actual strategy to predictably create pipeline. So that's just a lack of having a good plan and a good strategy. You know, when the founder leaves, there is a vacuum. What do? I don't know. Well, maybe we'll do some Facebook ads. It's unknown. So when you have all three of those, the lack of focus, the watery positioning, and just lacking a good strategy, the founder always gets sucked right back in, because if they're not selling, the company's not growing.
You say that, and it all makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, when it comes to a personal brand, you kind of want to be more of that like personal touch. How do you find that balance? How do you stay a personal brand, also have people handling some of that for you, not lose that piece of it?
So I have two thoughts on that. Number one is that you don't have to build a massive company. Some agency or some founders want to build a nice boutique business where they are the brand, and then maybe they have a couple courses, they have a couple programs, and they're fine. Like this is only for those business owners that want to ultimately not be tied to the day-to-day operations. Are you guys familiar? What's that baseball team that has the funny guy in the yellow suit and the
Savannah Bananas?
Savannah Bananas. There you go. So, do you think he's holding all the sales calls? Do you think he's doing all the concession stands? Like, he is a brand, right? He has been able to separate himself operationally from the business, and what he is doing is he's going on stages. He's talking about the principles of success, right? He talks about. He becomes the face of the brand. He becomes the attraction and the thing, the hook, if you will. But he doesn't deliver anything on the back end. So he's been able to figure out how to escape those founder-led sales. And I think it's partially. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Jesse Cole, and I've tried to get him to write the preface of my book. Didn't happen, but he'll get the next one. But at the same time, he's leveraged his personal brand to put himself on stages. Well, now he bought a baseball team, and he has an operations team behind him that's running that baseball team. And that's where he's not doing the sales. He's got a team on the back end, but he's still that brand. And he, as Jesse Cole, he's bringing in with his personal brand revenue by speaking on stages and pulling down $50,000 a talk and appearing on these different shows and promoting the personal brand aspect of what he did with the Savannah Bananas. And when I look at that, it almost seems like there's a big differentiator and like a firm line in the sand of being a personal brand and being a business brand, because Jesse isn't the brand of the Savannah Bananas. Okay. They have their own mascot. They have their own logo. They have their own brand. Sure, Jesse was the driving force behind that, but now his brand, the yellow tux and the personal branding side, it just seems like there's two totally different business models there and two different plans. So it makes me question: can you be both?
I think it's interesting. I think he's an example of someone who, as you said, who started this Savannah Bananas and was able to leverage his personal brand, but now step away from that on an operational perspective. But to your point, he's still building his brand. That is his primary source of revenue, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure the Bananas are pulling in tons of cash. So, I mean, I doubt that if he stopped speaking and making his own personal engagements, that he'd be hurting in any stretch of the imagination. But it just seems like it would be extremely difficult, or it seems like it is extremely difficult. And maybe it seems difficult to me because this is the battle that I'm fighting right now in real IRL, in real life. I'm trying to build my business on the back end while being a personal brand on the front end. And I'm having a difficult time drawing that correlation. And I can't imagine that I'm the only person that's listening or watching this show that's having that same battle. Sure. So it's interesting to me. I keep seeing your book behind you. Anyone, not everyone. How does that tie into everything here? Because if it's anyone and everyone, to me personally, kind of seems synonymous, but maybe I'm not looking at it right.
Yeah, the point is, it's coming from the saying that you could do anything, but you can't do everything.
Okay.
Which is all about being specific about what you choose to do. In the case of my book, it is a 5-step process to go from serving everyone to serving someone specifically. What the title is all about is that you can serve anyone, just not everyone. And so how it all ties together goes back to having a focus in your business, having a target market that you're specifically building your brand around and building your expertise around. And eventually, as a result of that, you are no longer required to be involved because you are not the reason why people are buying. Your expertise is, your specialization is. And that speaks louder over time, especially when you're able to show great results. That is what people are buying and not necessarily your brand.
Gotcha.
It's interesting. So with my book, I kind of went opposite. So I positioned my book to be for aspiring thought leaders. So I had a target audience in mind. And then I was told by people reading it that no, you need to go broader. This is not just for thought leaders. I had someone from the Merchant Marine post about it saying everyone needs to read this. I had people that were nurses and had nothing to do with like thought leadership and what I thought my audience was. So I feel like I tried to specialize, and then my specialty was just like, no, don't do that. Just kidding.
So the way I wrote my book was I wrote the book for a broader audience because this problem is not specific to agencies. It's specific to any business, right?
Sure.
Any small business that's coming up, they're serving too many different types of people. And because I was focused on agencies for my business, I got feedback from my beta readers, people who are reading the book, saying, this is great, but I'd love more examples about like from other agencies. Because I get what you're saying, but I'd like some examples. And as a result of that, I realized, hey, I'm not drinking my own Kool-Aid. I didn't write a book specifically for a specific reader, right? And as a result of that, it is a more narrow audience, but it is intended to be very, very hyper relevant and actionable for that audience. By the way, I wrote in the on the bottom of the book, it says
Agency edition. So you have 2 versions?
I have 1 version today, but should I expand into SaaS or some other business model, I could use the basis for this book. The cool thing is that the book is based on principles, right? So it can be applied in any direction.
Super smart. Now, so we know that we need to pick that niche audience. We need to pick that vertical. How do you pick it?
Great
question. How do you know which one's right?
So ideally, you've been in business for a while. You've probably had experiences with a variety of different types of vertical markets. And as a result of that, you have an intuition and you probably have some data on what a good client looks like. The data you're looking at is average revenue, lifetime value, retention, profit. All of those metrics come into play. And so there's a process that you can go through where you stack all your clients based on, group them based on the vertical market and just compare and contrast, like which verticals are the most profitable for us, which ones stay with us the longest, which ones pay us the longest or the most, and which ones refer business to us, right? So that's sort of a quantitative approach, very left brain. And you also want to look at it from a qualitative perspective. Who do I like working with? Who does my team enjoy working with the most? If I'm going to fill my business with dentists and I absolutely hate them, well, then I'm not going to have a very happy business, right? And so thinking about, who do I care about? Who would I love to be, involved with? I even call it's kind of an identity shift from my perspective. We talked about this idea of deep specialization. Mm-hmm. When you are targeting, let's say, dentists, I want you to emotionally and from an identity perspective, leave your industry, the podcast industry or whatever it is, and you're going to be joining the dental industry. You're now a part of that industry. You're a member of that industry and you're helping it to move forward. That's really the shift that we're looking for in the deep specialization work. But going back to your question, we do the quantitative, then we do the qualitative, like, do we like working with them? And then we also look at the market. How big is the opportunity? If we're only going to focus on dentists, how many are there out there? And what if we're like really successful? What does that mean from a revenue perspective and a profit perspective? And so you use these 3 steps to really make a high quality decision.
Now, this may or may not be on topic because I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But you talk about a 20% list.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And is that on topic? I don't know.
Yeah, that's absolutely on topic. So once you've identified a vertical market, out of the 100% of the businesses that you're targeting, let's call them dentists, because we're using that example. Out of the 10,000 dentists in the US, there's probably a lot more. Not all of them are equally going to be good clients for your business. Mm-hmm. Right? Some are going to be too small, some are going to be too big, and so on and so forth. So if you think about this concept of the Pareto principle, the 80-20, right? Where 20% of your clients generate 80% of your revenue or profits or retention, okay? We're going to apply that to your target audience. Only 20% of the businesses that are in your target audience, your total addressable market, are going to represent the most opportunity for your business. Chet Holmes wrote about it in his book, The Ultimate Sales Machine, which is called Your Dream 100, okay? These are the 100 businesses that provide have the potential to be your absolute best customers. And so I'm a big fan of less is more. And part of that is going in and applying this Pareto principle to your target audience. Okay, that's number 1. And then number 2, once you've identified the 20%, I want you to send an amazing gift to them.
Cookies.
Cookies.
How did I know that was coming? How did I know that was coming? I knew it.
Here we go.
As soon as you said it, man, I was like, here comes cookies.
So the backstory here, there's context here. So when I joined that company, Scorpion, the sales team were doing one call closes with the attorneys. We wanted to grow faster and not just rely on inbounds. And so we decided to go outbound. Found a list of attorneys. We found the 20% list. Meaning, in other words, the best businesses, the best attorneys on that list. And then ahead of a cold call, we would send them gourmet cookies. We'd FedEx it overnight. We'd bypass the gatekeeper. It goes right to the attorney. And the attorney would open up this FedEx box, take out the Scorpion tin of cookies, and have one. And if they're not standing up, if they're standing up, they need to hold the wall because the cookies are that good. Like, they're amazingly delicious.
Bro, I'm totally ordering some cookies as soon as we get off this. As soon as we wrap this podcast, I'm going to order some of those cookies.
Whenever I talk about cookies, my son is like, Dad, can I get some cookies? In any event, the cookies would end up in the law firm break room, and the law firm staff would be in the break room enjoying the cookies, and everyone's asking, well, who brought the amazing cookies? And someone would say, well, this company Scorpion. And then someone else would say, well, who's Scorpion? And eventually the word Scorpion was like bouncing off all the walls. And by the time we cold called or called to follow up on the cookies, it went from the traditional, like, the gatekeeper shutting down the call to, you're the ones who sent those amazing cookies.
You're the cookie guy.
Oh my God, those were so good. Thank you. Let me put you through. Right. And it absolutely, so this idea of giving the action of giving a gift ahead of a cold call, a good gift, allowed us to really scale up the business. We grew from 20 million to 40 million to 150 million, in part to leveraging gifts as a first touch. Well, cookies to start, but other things as well.
Why didn't we think of that, Sarah? It's cookies was the answer the whole time.
See, I tried. I ate them before they got out.
Cookies.
They were delicious.
I got to ask you though, why was the company called Scorpion?
Right. Well, I think it was between that and another name, and he was a Scorpio, the founder.
Oh, okay. All right.
And at first I didn't love it, but then it is distinctive. It's visual, right?
Oh, it's scary.
We were originally targeting as clients personal injury attorneys, and that's an aggressive market. Like they want to be aggressive in their marketing and their approach, and so they like that. But when we got into like home services and then medical practices, it wasn't the same vibe.
It wasn't quite as attractive, I'm sure. Yeah. No. I mean, scorpions are the one thing I'm probably going to have nightmares tonight because scorpions, that's my one biggest fear in my whole life.
Really?
Is scorpions.
Oh,
whatever. I've never even been stung by one. I have no idea. They just look
scary.
You live in the
Southwest?
Shit.
I mean, are they around?
I mean, I live in Texas. Yeah. I've come across plenty, but I've never been stung by one. But man, if I see one on TV, it's guaranteed. And now we've talked about them for 30 minutes. So I'm getting no sleep tonight. It's gonna.
If they're under stress, don't they sting themselves to death?
I've never heard that.
Yeah. That's like scorpions are like really bad under stress. And if you back them into the corner, they'll just sting themselves to death.
Wow.
Oh my God.
That's a great way to wrap this episode is on a nice positive note. Cookies was so much lighter. Cookie was so much lighter. But Corey, I mean, I've enjoyed the conversation. Honestly, you've really brought some practical insight into not only specializing, but also how do we, draw that line from being the brand to being a company. And it can be very, very difficult. And you've really shown some light on some of the struggles there and some of the solutions as well to positioning yourself accordingly. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, man. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, well, I recommend if you've been vibing on this topic, I would recommend that you go to anyonenoteveryone.com. It's the name of my book. And there you can, for your listeners can actually start to listen to the audiobook for free on that site. Oh,
sweet.
Amazing.
Direct access to the site, to the book. And yeah, it's a very actionable book. It's going to give you a lot of insights and tools to help you to escape founder-led sales through some of the processes we talked about today.
Do they need a code or anything for that?
Nope.
Awesome.
Yep. It's for your audience.
For everyone. For your, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you. dialing that in. Anyways, hey, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Branded. If you got some value out of this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button so we can continue to bring you these amazing episodes each and every week. And with that, I'm Larry Roberts.
And I'm Sarah Lucy. We'll talk to you next week.